welcome. This is a SATIB webinar on cyber risk. It's getting personal. It's getting personal, people. Even more so because of the extent to which having your cyber risk in order is important at a time when we're very focused on protection of personal information and our responsibility therein. There's a very long list of things that you have to do to get POPIA ready, as you will all know. One of them is to make sure that you have spent some time on your cyber security. It's probably one of the lowest hanging fruits with regards to being POPIA ready. So joining me to unpack this today, I have Loando Kwane, Underwriting Specialist, Cyber at I2 Special Risks, and Simon Campbell-Young, VP Global Sales from Digimune. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me today. I'm very pleased to have you here because I'm not a cyber specialist, so you are going to help me unpack this. For those of you who are attending today, you know the drill. The chat is open, as many of you have already discovered. And if you do have any questions for us, please use the Q&A folder at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A folder at the bottom of your screen, and we will endeavor to answer as many questions as possible. I personally have a whole bunch of questions for Simon Loando, so I'm going to get us kick-started, if that's okay, gentlemen. And I'm going to start with Loando. Types of cybersecurity threats. I mean, we talk about cybersecurity, we throw the word cybersecurity around. I understand that it's a fairly risky area to be in, particularly if you work in tourism, travel, and hospitality. What is cybersecurity? What are some of the threats that you, as a risk specialist, would insure against, would you say? Loando, over to you.
Hi, Natalia, and welcome to all the viewers today. So, from my perspective, I'll give you the insurance, what we see from the insurance side. And what we can say for sure is that in the last 18 months or so, the risk landscape has completely changed. We're seeing the sophistication and the frequency and the severity of cyber incidents increasing. Every time as an insurer, we're seeing more on our books. I mean, recently we're paying out more claims. And hackers are focused on more commonly used systems and platforms. For example, we've seen recently the Microsoft Exchange platform being exploited, which has led to several companies suffering some sort of incidents as well. The studies have shown that within the last 12 months, 63% of small businesses have experienced some kind of data breach. Now, if you think of those kind of numbers, you as in your business, you could fall within those numbers quite easily. And from that, 66% have not been able to recover from a cyber breach or cyber attack. Now, this is quite alarming stats if you look at what we're seeing in the market, on the ground, and where the cyber risk landscape is coming from. And being in the hospitality industry, your key risks are the types of data that you collect from your clients. So you're collecting your reservations, you might have IDs, you might have card data that you're storing. And with POPIA coming in now, how are you then safeguarding that data? So these are some of the risks that you're looking at. And with the volume and sensitivity of that data, the hospitality industry becomes quite a big threat when it comes to cyber attacks.
Yeah, and especially around that whole POPIA, protection of personal information. So you've got my ID number, even with the tracking and tracing. If you think about it, going into a restaurant now, I put my ID number. Do I really need to put my ID number? What are you doing with that information? Are you storing it somewhere? Where is it going to go? Simon, over to you. Types of cybersecurity threats that you see currently emerging. I mean, I'm terrified just hearing Microsoft Exchange. I thought that was secure. Simon, what are you seeing on your side?
Yeah, look, first of all, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here and nice to be talking to everybody. Look, the cybersecurity threat landscape is just booming, for want of a better term. It's really out of control to a large degree at the moment. I'm sure everybody, if you watch the news, you're getting snippets of it very specifically. The aspect of ransomware is at an all-time high, but generally, as pointed out earlier, it's theft of data. As information that's being stored or information that's being passed across what are technically safe networks is being attacked, is being harvested and then being exfiltrated. But it's also down to simple crime, which really resides, for example, across the social media landscape, which is now a huge new threat landscape where, you've got these nefarious threat actors that are committing crimes that are related to, for example, malicious content, or quite simply brand impersonation, or creating fake profiles, hacking accounts that then allow them to, for example, run customer-related scams. So a lot of the crime that you're seeing right now is focused really around, for example, revenue damaging threats, which really can affect the brand or the organization. As everyone knows, cybercrime is no longer, a blue screen shutdown and a smiley face. There's generally something going on in the background, and there's generally a targeted plan around the cybercrime that's being committed. So yeah, it's a tricky space to be at the moment. There's no doubt about it.
Who's got the time for this? Oh, Luando, come on in.
Sorry, Natalia, if I may just add on to what Simon says, the view of a hacker has also changed. It's not a teenager sitting in the basement with a hoodie, with a Red Bull, typing away and trying to hack into your systems. The person trying to get into your networks and your data could look like me and you. So definitely the landscape is completely different to what you may have traditionally thought it was.
Sure, somebody's got a lot of time on their hands. Simon, I just want to go back to you. You were talking about something and it triggered a thought for me. We talk about protection of personal information. It's particularly important for those of us who live in the tourism hospitality world. And I want to just get a sense of where this kind of attack would happen. Is it in the storage? Is it in the collection of the information? Where are the weak spots typically that you have found from a technical perspective, where these nefarious people are going in and causing mischief?
Yeah, so POPIA is a tricky area, and it's going to be a tricky area for all of us. So that privacy, the Personal Information Act, you need to be careful. You need to be aware of what pressure POPIA will put you under as a business or as an individual. So in other words, the storing of data, the collection of data, the dissemination of data. There's now very strict rules and regulations around that, and certainly what's happened. If you have a look at, for example, the UK and Europe with GDPR, as everyone was fast tracking to acclimatize themselves to the restrictions and the requirements from a GDPR perspective, so the hacking community was really working hard to try and get a foothold inside where people had not, covered up behind them. But it will place additional pressure. Wherever data is being collected, that's a target zone. Wherever data is being stored, that's a target zone. And wherever data is then being passed from your organization to, for example, a payment provider, or for example, to a third-party organization, those are easy targeted areas. And if you think about it, just your web-facing interfaces, for example, a website, if it's collecting data and storing data, that's just an easy place for hackers to go and try and find their way into, which will then cause large-scale difficulties for an organization that is hacked and that is storing data, and that data is exfiltrated, and they weren't, correctly covered for that event. It does become very dangerous.
You talk about passing data on, so now I'm seeing two actors in the mix here, and Luanda, I'm going to come to you. You perhaps want to answer this question as well. I'm seeing two actors in the mix. I'm seeing the person who's currently got the information, the personal information. I'm seeing the person to whom they are transmitting or transferring that information. Even something as simple as using email to send personal information is a very scary space for me. Do you have a perspective on how one does that safely, so that both actors, the person who's sending and the person who's receiving, is doing that in a safe manner?
Yeah, I think you've raised quite a good point there, Natalia. So, with POPIA, you also have to be cognizant that whether you're passing the data on to a third party to process, whether you're passing it on to be stored, you as the individual that collected that data originally remain the custodian of that data. And safeguarding those tools, you use things like your some encrypted secure network to transfer files, to transfer data, where at least with that level of encryption being in place there will slow down any hackers from getting that information, and they'll need to decrypt it first before they can even use it. So encryption is always something that you can always look at in terms of how you communicate between individuals, between companies, between external third parties. I think that's one of the ways that you could definitely look at how you can safeguard the movement of information.
Luanda, if I can just ask you around the safeguarding and the insurance angle, are there certain things that I as a business have to make sure that I'm ticking to ensure that I'm safeguarding information, particularly personal identification information, that if I didn't do that, that would put me on the back foot if something did happen and I had to claim from insurance, for example? Are there any things that I should be doing as a business that you will ask me as an insurer and say, why didn't you do this, and this?
Sure. So from an insurance perspective, what we recommend and would like to see from our clients are, what are they doing about employee awareness, for example? Are you training your staff on a regular basis to understand that phishing scams, so they're not falling for phishing scams? Are you looking at your password policy? How secure are passwords? Are you using longer characters? Are you using multi-factor authentication? So not only do you authenticate with your username and your password, but you also get a one-time PIN to also gain access into those servers, so that at least there's another level of protection that you're giving. Employees, please don't avoid shortcuts at all costs. We're working from home now. We're no longer updating our passwords as regularly. Those kind of things, that hygiene that you were doing when you were in the office. As an example, if you were in an office space to begin with, you need to carry that over to your home environment, wherever you are working. Other things to look at is your endpoint protections. Are you using reputable antivirus software on your machines? Are you applying patches? So Microsoft, for example, releases patches whenever they find something. So are you allowing those to automatically download onto your machines? Are you using encryption, like I mentioned before? So these are some of the elements that we will look for within an application for insurance to see, how secure are you actually keeping yourself, so that, when it comes down to it, that should you get a breach, we know that you've done at least a good level of a minimum to secure yourself before we then say, okay, we'll help you now with the actual breach and aftermath thereof.
VPNs, Simon? Is that like, now I'm working from home, everyone's working from home, used to work on a VPN in an office, don't really work from a VPN at home. Am I being dumb? I should be working off a VPN?
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% correct. VPN is one really important factor, and another one that Luanda brought up that was a really good point was training, right? The weakest link is always going to be the human. It's not going to be the machine. So the better educated you are, and the better educated your team is from a cybersecurity best practice perspective, the better it is for the entire organization, and the better it is from a risk profile management perspective. But we're a business that focuses on sort of device and endpoint protection, and then also cloud and internet based protection. So what you've got to do as a business, as an individual, is you need to understand what your security posture is. You need to think about it and proactively think about it. So remember, a bunch of hackers are thinking about it all day, every day. The 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 minutes you think about it per week is clearly not enough. You're outgunned in terms of the thought process. So you've really got to adopt a stance that says, look, it's a real threat. It's going to come thick and fast, and it's not going to slow down. So clearly you've got to have, in our view, you've got to have an on-premises based security posture, which is right. I need to protect the devices. I've got to train the staff, and I need to be proactive around that. And then secondly, you need to have a internet-based risk mitigation solution that's helping you and assisting you in monitoring your off-premises risk profile, which in other words is monitoring your company information that's being leaked and exposed across the web, having a look at your social media exposure on the web. So So it's very definitely training. It's very definitely on-premises based risk mitigation and device level protection. And then one step up, it's making sure that you've got a solution set that's gives you a window into your your internet-based risk exposure. Absolutely critical.
I love that term, risk posture, and I'm going to put it out there that I'm a Luddite when it comes to this kind of thing, and just the thought of having to have a risk posture, or security posture rather, is a bit of a terrifying thought for me as a small business. You know, I've got 14 people who work for me. They're based all around the country, and I think many people who are on the call today have a very similar scenario where they're small businesses. They're Luddites, you know, it's not a comfortable space for us. And I'm just wondering, as a small business, is it firstly affordable? And secondly, is it easy for me to get a company, even like your company, just to help me think about this a little bit more than I'm thinking about it on a weekly basis, since this is such a big risk? Is it affordable, or is the cost prohibitive? Just try and make me feel better.
Well, yeah, I think absolutely at a cyber level, it's completely affordable. And if you think it won't happen to you as a small business, it definitely will. Small businesses are high value targets because you can do millions and millions of them, you know, in one hit. It's very simple. It doesn't necessarily need to be a sophisticated targeted attack. It can be a mass drop. So it's a to quote that movie Top Gun, a target-rich environment. You're in a dangerous space in terms of managing your own data, managing your own information, and managing your own security, your own security risk, risk assessment and your risk posture. So it's highly affordable, and there are very clever tools available that are not expensive and are highly sophisticated. It's got better and better and better, and technically it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So as technology keeps upgrading itself. So don't be put off, and don't be swept up into, wow, that just sounds too high tech and too expensive. It's not. There's some very, very clever tool sets that are highly effective.
Lwando, Simon was just talking about the extent to which small businesses are hit, and you mentioned a few stats right at the beginning, because you think, I'm a small business, why would they go after me, essentially? Are you seeing, in the role that you're in at the moment, the extent to which small businesses are being targeted?
Small businesses are definitely a target. I think the one thing that we always say is that from a hacking perspective, they are not, sometimes they're not always looking for a specific target. They cast their net far and wide, and whether you're small business or large business, and if you get caught in that net, unfortunately, then you will be part of that exploit. And hacking as a business is massive, especially in this country. I think SA is losing about 2.2 billion rand a year from cybercrime. So these are some of the things, and globally, this is in the trillions of dollars. So, you normally think that, cyber and hacking only happens in America or in Europe, but it's happening right here where we are right now. And, small business are not infallible. No matter what security you have, you can still get breached. And as Simon mentioned as well, the human element is really vital. The more training you have, the more awareness you have around your risks, the better you can support yourself and your business from being breached. So it is happening. We're seeing it on the ground from an insurer perspective. We're seeing more and more incidents from smaller businesses. We're paying more and more claims, reluctantly in some cases, but we're there to do that. So this is not an area where it's only for the large corporate risks. It really will affect the small shops, like Natalia mentioned. You've got a small business, you work remotely, but there's a very small team. How you safeguard that team and that network that you've built is quite vital.
Because it's also a little bit like having a home and putting the security in your home. If you've got a high wall outside with barbed wire and electric fences, and the guy next door to you's got a low fence, no electric, no security, nothing. I mean, whose door are you going to knock on, break into? You're not going to scale the 6-foot wall with the barbed wire. You're going to go to the guy who hasn't really put in place you know, just step by some kind of step. And I think you've just got to make sure that you're putting in place something to deter, as opposed to leaving yourself completely vulnerable, essentially. If you have a question for either Simon or Luando, please feel free to throw that into the Q&A folder for me at the bottom of the screen, like Christian has, and I will very happily ask our gentlemen experts for their advice. We've also got a question in the chat, which I will take, Chris, but if you could please direct all your questions into the Q&A for me, it will be easier for me to navigate those questions. Luando, I'm curious about the cyber insurance part. I'm not saying that I'm not going to behave and do everything I possibly can to mitigate cybersecurity risk, I promise. But if I do become a victim of cybersecurity, an attack of sorts, whether it's ransomware, phishing, whatever it is, does cyber insurance provide that protection? How many loopholes would I need to jump through is my question.
No loopholes. It's quite simple. This is how I like to explain the cyber policy to anyone. What it gives you a defined incident response process. So when you purchase a cyber product, you will get access to leading experts who will help you with your breach. And this will include things like your IT forensic team, which are the guys who will come in at the moment that you realize that you have been breached and help you contain, triage, and get back up and running as soon as possible. We will then also give you access into your legal services. So you may have regulatory requirements that you might need to for example, with POPIA, it's to represent yourself to the regulator. The legal team can assist you with all the legal matters around those things, as well as any representation you may require from a liability perspective that you may need. You also have the reputation management part of the things, right? So you need to manage what the public are seeing and saying about your business. You don't want to be seen as the company that is not safe because you've had a breach. And usually breaches are not because you were not safe, you were unlucky for one reason or another. So we have a dedicated PR team that can help you craft messages, help you communicate to your stakeholders, communicate to the public, and try and help to manage that reputational damage. So these are all the things that the policy can give you. And in that, it includes elements such as your cyber extortion. So should you have an extortion demand, so now you've been hit with ransomware or some sort of malware, you're locked out of your network, and the hacker says, please, pay us 10 Bitcoin, or we will sell this information on into the dark web, or we'll release it into the public. That's where the policy will come in. The team will negotiate one with those hackers to firstly see if what they are claiming they actually do have, and secondly, they will try and get the ransom as low as possible, whilst working in the background to try and decrypt those systems, get you back up and running as soon as possible. If they can't decrypt those systems, the policy will then go as far as to actually pay for those ransoms. Now, a question you might ask is that, is paying a ransom funding terrorism or funding criminal activity? Part of the things that we go through as insurers is that we do checks and balances before we pay those sort of payments to the attackers. So we do OFAC checks, and once those have all been passed, we are then authorized to then clear those payments. We have actually paid two extortion demands in the last month. It's something that is not it's new to us at the moment, and unfortunately, it is a growing part of the cyberspace. So these are the things that we look for. And to continue on what you're getting from a policy as well, you get that first party impact. So what happens when you are interrupted? What happens if your systems are corrupted or infected by malware? You'll suffer some sort of downtime, business interruption. The policy will then cover you for those kind of costs, including things like increased cost of working, should you need to employ additional resources to try and help you recover. It'll also include things like fines and penalties. So again, this relates back to POPIA. What happens when POPIA says, okay, because of this breach, you have actually been found guilty of breaching some of the regulations under POPIA. The policy will help you to represent yourself to that regulator, and it could go as far as to pay those fines and penalties. The unfortunate part then is that penalty itself is not clear that we can pay that currently under the regulations of the country. However, we are yet to see how this will play out as the regulations only came into effect from 1 July. Then there's a liability element as well. What happens to your customers? So being hospitality, you're holding a lot of, you might have tickets that have been stolen. You might have reservations that have been cancelled unknowingly because of a hack, and there's a liability to the clients that had paid for those tickets and those reservations. They then turn around and sue you for those losses. The policy will help you to represent yourself in court for those and pay for any damages and settlement that may ensue. So it's quite a rich policy, really. It gives you a lot of cover, more than you may think. It's not only about, oh, there's still some money, please, reimburse my money. There's a lot more cost that can't go around a breach, and the policy will assist you from start to end.
I can't believe you've paid some of those ransoms, like 10 Bitcoin, 5 bananas, 1.
It's amazing.
It's unbelievable.
It's amazing when you speak to the forensic team and how they say they're actually negotiating with these guys. They're getting to understand the language that they use, and you can see the operation is 24/7. It's become very institutionalized, as acting like a real business. It's no longer Luando here trying to hack company over there. It's really, a serious business, and they also bet their own reputations in actually, following through with their promises. And when they don't, they lose business, essentially, from people who want to hire, hackers for nefarious intent. So it is unfortunately a very scary landscape, a very scary role to be in. But there is a policy that can assist you should you find yourself in those deep waters.
Okay, so now, Simon, I do not have Luando's team behind me, helping me to do all of the stuff that he was just saying we're going to do. I now have to deal with the fact that I've been hacked. What do I do? Can I report it to anyone? Must I mobilize the team? What are the things I need to do if I've been hacked? What would your suggestions be? You're on mute. That's a penalty.
That's another tequila for Simon.
Yeah, so ransomware. Yeah, I mean, tongue in cheek, the first thing you should do is run for your backup. and if it's a ransomware event, hope like hell that your last backup was pre the ransomware arrival, because then you're great and then you're good. But ideally, as Luanda pointed out, if you're sitting with a policy that performs, you've got an incident response team or an incident response environment that can that the policy will pull the trigger on, to get to you and start to remediate, the crime, and then to be able to start, to start taking action. I think that's always going to be the first port of call. But as I said, it's really in the preventative action, that you need to be taking up front. And so the ability to, to protect yourself, does rely largely on, as we said, the human error. So, there's some real basics there, in terms of making sure that you're running the, a sophisticated software stack, A, and B, that software stack that you're running, from a protection perspective is up to date. In other words, you're running the patches, you're running the updates, because, the crack in the door is the time differential between the last update and you running it, right? In between that is where the crack in the door is, and the guys are writing bugs just for those little cracks. So yeah, I mean, I guess, the other aspect to really be aware of is, which talks slightly to Luando's comments about the reputational aspect, because that is far-reaching. And that can really be dangerous from an organization perspective. And that's also where, you need to be looking at what the threat landscape looks like, outside of the premises, very specifically, on the internet, and very specifically, for example, across your social media environment. Because, for example, you could have an existing employee, a disgruntled ex-employee, a competitor, for example, who might well post, malicious, offensive or sensitive content up onto your social media pages. That kind of thing can be really, really dangerous. You might have, for example, somebody unwittingly posting for example, a racial slur up onto a social media page, or exfiltrating sensitive data like, credit card numbers, or you could find a competitor who, might be posting something that is, not ideal, onto one of your social media environments. You only have to look at the travel industry which, for example, to a large degree, lives and dies by TripAdvisor. There's a lot of fraudulent and fictitious and nefarious activity that takes place on TripAdvisor, which can also be very dangerous for for certain organizations. So, the agenda is like we said in the beginning, it's to be eyes on, and it's to be alert, and to actually base your entire assumption, from a daily basis on something can go wrong, and that you've got a plan to protect yourself against that event.
Talk to me about backups, Simon. So now you've instilled the fear of God in me, and I'm thinking, how often do I need to do backups? How often would you recommend that someone in the tourism hospitality space do backups?
Sure. Look, at a personal level, I would be backing up on a daily basis. It's so easy. It's cloud-based now. It's easy just to, as you're working through the day, your system's backing up to the cloud. It's very, very simple. If you're an organization and you are transactional, in other words, you are collecting loads of data and you're transacting loads of data, you should you should have an automated backup that's running also on a daily basis. Backups aren't a once every 6 months or once a month or once a quarter event. If your data goes missing and, for example, you experience a ransomware event and a hacker manages to lock up your HR file, or manages to lock up your ERP or your invoicing structure, or your database files, you lost, you stuck, you can't transact. So it's in my humble opinion, it's mission critical. I think backups are your first port of call. At least it gives you yesterday or last week at the worst, or last month at the absolute worst, point of departure to start from in terms of catching up. So yeah, I think backing up is absolutely critical.
Lwando, anything to add on that?
I completely agree with what Simon has said. I think we have, one of our requirements is backups, because that's where the team will recover or start the recovery process from. And the earlier the backups are, as in if they were yesterday or 12 p.m. today, it makes those efforts a lot easier than if you only had backups 6 months ago. Now you've lost 6 months worth of data, potentially 6 months worth of changes you made to your system, and you have not backed any of that up, and you've suffered an incident. That'll cost you a lot more to recover from than if you have backups running from yesterday or last week, as an example. So backups are crucial. Keeping copies, which are also encrypted, as well as I think cloud now helps with the whole offline, where if your production environment is encrypted or suffers some sort of ransomware, that does not spread to your backup environment as well. So keeping those two separate is vital, and frequency of those backups is also quite vital.
You both talked about this mystical cloud. Now, I know I've told you that I'm a Luddite. I won't tell you how old I am, but I have this impression that anything that goes in the cloud is secure, and that it's a safe space, and there are going to be no issues at all. Simon, am I living in a dream world? Is the cloud as secure as I think it is? Or are there potential risks in updating things to a cloud?
Yeah, Natalia, there are potential risks, okay? But like everything else, it is sealable, and like everything else, there are loopholes in the process in terms of exfiltrating the data to the cloud, and then depending on your cloud provider and your, the storage capacity or the security capacity that cloud provider might have, does open or mitigate a large part of the risk. But for the most part, most of the cloud provisioning services are highly secure. You can run cloud-based security tools on your system that exfiltrates securely and encrypts on the way into the cloud, and that once it's sitting on the cloud, it's nice and safe. It's wrapped up nice and snugly, and your data is technically safe. The backup and the hosting and the cloud providers are under major pressure at the moment. They are extreme targets for hacking groups. Some of them have been hacked. Some of them have had data exfiltrated. But by and large, that to me would be, is a really comfy space to start. If you're an old school, run the backup, put it onto the external storage device, lock it in the safe, put it in your briefcase, go home, bring it back to work the next day. Either way, run the backup.
Run the backup. Some of the other things that,
having on a floppy disk. Yeah.
Put on a floppy. Oh yeah, no, I'm old.
Yeah,
I do remember floppy disks, but I don't think my Mac would allow me to do that. Some of the other things that I found really interesting and didn't think about previously when I was looking into the cybersecurity things was things like accessing websites that don't have the HTTPS, they're just HTTP, for example. Not updating, we think about our computers and updating software on our computers, but we don't think about our mobile phones and the extent to which our mobile phones are protected. So updating apps and that kind of thing. I mean, it's just a complete and utter no-brainer, but we don't think about it. I mean, are there any other really easy things that you, as you said, it's the human error, it's the humans, not the tech that's the problem, essentially. Are there any other easy things that you can tell your team to do?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the age-old adage from any Mac user is I'm safe. Now that is an absolute fallacy. So if you're running a Mac and you're not running security software, you're out of your mind. Broad statement, but it's 100% factual. If you look at your handheld devices, your mobile phone, your tablets, they're ubiquitous now, so that is the de facto transactional tool for me to log into my banking or for me to log into an app. So to not run device layer protection on your handheld device, to me is also really not clever. And if you are doing that, you really should think about it. And there is enough mobile security product and tool sets out there for you to be really comfortable. It sits in the background, small footprint, doesn't interfere with anything, but it's keeping you it's keeping you really nice and secure. And personally, that's what I would do. The other thing is, what most people don't realize is that apps are porous. Apps are easy to hack. Apps are easy to gain access to. And apps are being hacked at a rampant rate at the moment. They're an easy place to just go in, get, either via the app store, either via the app directly, and just start to exfiltrate that information that's sitting inside the app. Think about it. I always use this example. Take a dating app, for example. People are putting their life's work into a dating app. All of the personal information they can think of are going into those dating apps. Now that's a gold mine, to exfiltrate and then to be able to use that data. Think of shopping apps. People leave card present so they can make repeat purchases. Also a gold mine. So, you just got to think about all these things, and you probably find that most of our kids online are way more advanced than most of us.
Well, I was going to use the analogy of kids because I heard somebody their kid was using their tablet and had been playing some game, and that's how the tablet actually got hacked. So they thought they were being as careful as possible, but you don't actually ever know. Okay, so I want to take a question from Christian, who said, is there any indication as to what data hackers are after? We do not have any banking details in our system. We have basic client info like names and surnames. If we get a direct booking, we will have an email address. Is this a big risk? And is this info that the hackers would be after and would use essentially?
If I may, I think, Christian, the type of data, it does depend, and obviously, as you're saying, banking data is a lot more sensitive, a lot more lucrative than just your name and your address. However, having that access and that portal to say I've got a database of names and emails, I can then use that to then use phishing scams on those individuals for more gains down the line. So any kind of data that you're storing is actually quite important. And like I said earlier on, hackers don't really discriminate. Unless you are a specific target for a specific reason, whatever they can get from you will be used in one way or another down the line. And with the policy, like I was saying before, is that we've seen this where a database has been accessed where it's just names and addresses. but we have a monitoring service that's part of the policy, which will then monitor those details, and if are they used later on to open up fraudulent accounts in those people's names, so they don't find themselves being blacklisted when they do go for home loans, legitimately seeing that they've got all this debt that they've incurred and they have not paid. So, you know, no data is too small in my view. You may think, you know, like I said, you know, you're a small business, you're not really collecting too much. You may not be a specific target, but however, should you be caught in that wider net, unfortunately, whatever they get from you, and with the new POPIA Act, you will then be liable for that data and how it's used later on.
Yeah, and I think POPIA also doesn't discriminate. POPIA doesn't say, you know, it's only this data, it's any personal data. Simon, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, let me give you a really practical example of data. So let's say, for example, there is, sitting inside this network that's on this call, there is an insured client who runs high-end game lodges or high-end hotels, or, you know, something along those lines. So that information potentially that is sitting at the insured, it's names, right? It's, for example, it might be celebrities. There might be, for example, information around their general travel requirements. There might be their dietary requirements inside there. There might be their stage name housed on the database. So yeah, it's not always around the basics. Now, if I get into you know, that organization's database and I have that information, and let's say I'm a competitor or a hacker, I can start to target them very specifically, and I can start to move them away from you to me because I've got a better service, because I know more and more about them. You know, just hypothetically, it might not relate to a loss of funds or a loss of, but it might certainly relate to a loss of revenue, because the guy might not, or the girl might not come back next year because I've got them, you know, down at my game lodge, hypothetically.
Yeah, and also the more they know about you, I mean, even when they say don't fill out those Facebook quizzes because it's just people trying to get personal information so that they can scam you through phishing, or, you know, essentially. So the more information you give about somebody's personal, or leak inadvertently about someone's personal preferences, the more you're putting them in danger of being targeted, essentially. Is that right, Simon?
Correct. That's 100% correct. Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so Chris has said, apart from NOD 32, I hope either of you know what NOD 32 is, what else do I need? Bearing in mind, and Chris, I hear you, I've had no real income for the last 2 years. What else do I need over and above NOD 32?
Yeah, so NOD 32 is an antivirus solution. So, you know, that's a fantastic start, really good solution. You know, no issues there at all. I would say that you know, depending on the size of your network, depending on the extent of the customer set, and depending on the extent of the transactional information that's processing through your system, I would say that's a very good start, you know, is to make sure that you're running an up-to-date version, make sure that you're running the latest version, make sure that you know, you've got NOD 32 installed across all of the machinery. The other one I would obviously say, purely because it's one of our solutions, would be to look at what we do with our DigiImmune solution, which will protect your digital exposure and your digital risk exposure. I would say that would be absolutely fundamental. So that's having a look at your web-facing landscape. It's having a look at your exposure across the deep and dark web. It's having a look at your social media exposure, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, you know, those two really do go hand in hand, depending on the size and the extent of the network and the systems that you're running.
I'm going to be phoning you after this, Simon. Best have your phone. Natasha said, how do you destroy the data that you have? On PC, you delete and you empty your deleted items dustbin. Is that all? I know that I've managed to retrieve stuff before that I've deleted, so I don't know that it is. If you have printed it out, do you have to shred it? Then what do you do with the shreddings? Can you just throw it into your dustbin or recycle it? Are we all rushing out to buy industrial shredders? I think for the purposes of this discussion, though, online, on your computer, how do you delete, how do you destroy information? Simon?
Yeah, I mean, there are shredding tools. There are data destruction tools. You know, so if you need help, you know, maybe just reach out to us. But it is possible, absolutely. You know, dumping it into the delete file and then hoping it's gone, absolutely not. You know, you can go and pull that data out of a delete file, reconstruct it, and put it all back together again. It's really simple. So, but I think rather reach out to us and we can show you. We can send you some information.
Thanks, and we'll distribute your information after the fact. Luando, you wanted to weigh in?
Just to add on the physical files, the printed files, you know, when it comes to cyber insurance and liability that you may incur, physical files, printed files are also trigger the policy, because that is a potential breach of privacy that you may have given. So it's not only the digital files that you're keeping on your PC, it's those files you leave on your desk. So a random person can walk by and see, oh, this is quite a sensitive file. Let me steal the information. Or your PC got stolen, your bag, sorry, got stolen, and you've got documents in that bag, and those documents then get used in a nefarious way. That will be a trigger in terms of the cyber insurance policy, and as well could be frowned upon when it comes to POPIA and how you safeguarded that data. So something to bear in mind, that it's not just the digital files that you need to, you know, keep safe and shred in a digital safe way, but it's also your physical files and how you actually lock those up and keep them away from you know, unauthorized users.
Okay, so we really are all rushing out to buy industrial shredders. Thanks for that, Natasha. Okay, Celeste. Celeste has asked, if one's PC and cell phone are linked, would the security on the PC not automatically cover the cell phone? Simon, do you have a view on that?
No, you would need, no, they're not automatically linked. Just because they're linked and they're synced doesn't mean you're running the security posture on both. You'll need a license for your notebook device, and you would need an activation license for your handheld device. So no, is the answer.
Sorry. Okay. And a really interesting topic that Luando actually answered for me, but I'm going to just verbalize it as well. If personal data is held by a third-party service provider and is attacked, who is responsible? Is it the service provider? And Luando's responded saying, you remain the data custodian, therefore liability will be on you. And I think that that's the thing, is we think we're running a relay race with a baton and we got the information, and now we're passing it over to Luando, who's running the rest of the race. And where does the liability start and end, essentially? You know, who has that liability? Luando, do you want to unpack your response a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, to add on to that. So again, got to remember that you collected that data. Your client, you are the touch point for that client. So they said, okay, Natalia, I want you to help me with this event I'm hosting. Here's the information of my clients. Natalia says, okay, thanks. I'm going to give this to my, you know, my external team to process that data on my behalf. Now, I don't know who she gave the data to. So if I find that, you know, that data got compromised in some way and now I've got a liability on my case, I'm not going to run to the third-party service provider. I'm going to run to Natalia's business and say, hey, I gave you this data. I found out that the data that I gave you is the data that's actually being used in the public. Therefore, I'm suing you for any damages that have been caused. This is why I said that you will always remain the data custodian, regardless of who you pass that information on to. And in this scenario, you know, that third party will also have some liability, because under POPIA, again, they also have a duty to safeguard whatever information that they collect. So for them, their client is not me. It will be Natalia in this example. And from that instance, Natalia could also potentially sue them. So it could be a chain of suits. However, you as the first port of call for your customer will always be have partly liable, if not fully liable, for that information.
Sorry, another question, please. If a client holds the information, so they haven't finished the question. Sorry, Anonymous, please finish your question and there we go. Another question, please. If a client holds the information of 300,000 clients, what kind of limit would they need, Luando? Off the top of your head, go on.
It's a big
so when it comes to the limits of insurance, of indemnity, it really boils down to what you can afford in some instances, and the cost of notification that you might bear. So 300,000 clients is quite a big data set, you know, and the cost of notifying each and every one of those clients, should there be a compromise of their data, could be quite significant. Add on to the fact that there are costs of the legal team that you may need to consult. There's a cost of the forensic teams that are on site to assist you with that breach. There's quite a few things that you need to consider. And there have been studies, globally that have been done, and I can give you a figure. It doesn't always apply, especially to smaller businesses, where the average cost of a data breach is sitting around $3.2 million US. So that's what, 40 odd million Rand. So if you look at that as a benchmark, you could say I should be buying minimum 40 million Rand indemnity. And it doesn't always correlate. It all depends on your business. Even with the 300,000 data set, I mean, I've dealt with clients who have millions of data sitting on their servers. And that doesn't always mean that if they get compromised, the cost of that breach would reach that sort of level. So it's a tough one for us to really give you an indication of where you should go. It will all depend on obviously the security that you have put in place, how quickly we're able to recover that data and the systems that have been compromised, and what you do thereafter in terms of the reputational damage and management of your business. So some limits are not going to be mega, others will be very small. And in terms of what we're seeing from a claims perspective, maybe this will help you a bit more, is that we have not seen claims breaching the 5 million Rand mark. So if you have a 5 million Rand policy, most likely that should cover you for the costs of a breach. But again, each circumstance is different. I cannot say that what happens to you will equate 100,000 Rand claim versus what happens to the next person, which might be a 10 million Rand claim. So it really does depend on the individual business and the circumstance that has happened around the breach.
Was that 5 million US or South African Rands?
Rands.
Yeah, okay.
SA Rands, yeah.
South African Rands.
Yeah, just to comment on that, at that extent, 300,000 customers, all experiencing a simultaneous event from a cyber perspective, it's got to be endemic, right? There's got to be a crack in, for example, if all of those clients were running a security software system, there's got to be a crack that's exploitable, that the guys have found that they're able to deploy that crack across that quantum. And technically that's an endemic event, correct, Lwanda, if I've got the terminology right from an insurance speak perspective. And also,
you're on the money this time.
Yeah, and also it would need to be a perfect storm within a perfect storm. It has to be a 0-day event from a cyber perspective. It's got to be endemic and it's got to hit everyone simultaneously. So yeah, but they're out there. Potentially.
Yeah, those black swan events, 0-day events, we cross our fingers and hope that they don't happen. If your whole entire client base gets hit because of one event, it can be obviously devastating from an insurance perspective as well as from the client's perspective. So it isn't common, but it does happen. These things, we live in a world where anything is really literally possible.
Oh yeah. That's for sure. Okay, so we are coming to the end of our webinar. One last question for both of you. It's the same question, and that is, now we've just told you, Chris has just told you, we've had a year and a half of pain as the tourism hospitality sector. It's a year and a half of pain, very little income coming in. If you were to give me one thing that I need to do as my business to get my cybersecurity house in order in the next week, what would that one thing be that I do? And I'm going to put pressure on Simon. You first.
Yeah, so I would do one thing, but it's two things. Number one, it's your device layer and your network protection. Okay, and number two, wrapped into it, which really just talks about your security posture, right? Is your on-premises device layer protection solution, and then your web-facing digital risk protection solution, all wrapped up into one, nice and easy, and then sit back and wait for the tourists to arrive and for the economy to kick up again.
You cheated too. That's another tequila. Lando,
okay, fair enough.
I think I like what Simon has said. I think that takes care of the security element of it. But the other part, as we've sort of had a recurring theme throughout, is the human part. please, awareness training, awareness training, awareness training. Understand your risks, understand what your systems are capable of, understand where, where you might be weaker than not. And training your employees on what's happening currently, phishing attacks, ransomware, putting together the incident response templates for yourself, so you know who to contact and when, should you have an issue, all for part of that training and awareness program. So I think that is something that is quite crucial, and a lot of businesses do lack. Even large corporates, you're sitting with 400 to 1,000 employees, and you don't even do annual training just once to say, listen, guys, yeah, this is what the hacks are happening. This is what's happening. We need to safeguard our passwords, safeguard what we do with our machines when we go to the bathroom or go on lunch, those kind of things. So the training aspect of it is quite crucial.
I've got one sneaky last question from Sean, who said, in a company structure that comprises several separate entities under a holding company, does the intercompany liability affect each? Lwando, would you know the answer to that?
So from an insurance perspective, so you've got multiple companies under a group who may not be running on the same shared network or IT infrastructure. We would typically look at those separately. So one could have liability on another within that group, and the policy would respond to those kind of incidents. So it all depends on how it's structured and what information we have from each individual entity. So we treat them quite separately. Therefore, the intercompany liability would then apply. If you, for example, you're servicing one of the group companies, and that service got interrupted because you had a breach, you had a cyber event, there could be damages to the other company, so they would be able to find some kind of recourse against you, and the policy would assist in that sort of suit. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for answering all our difficult questions, and for everyone that logged on today to learn a little bit more about cybersecurity. We did record the webinar, and we will be releasing it on a special SATIB landing page. So please look out for that. We'll send that through to you on email. And if you have any ideas on other topics that you're wanting us to help you with going forward, please do let me know as well. You all know how to reach me. What can I say? Lwando and Simon, you made cybersecurity interesting, terrifying, scary, all at once. And I do hope you enjoy your 3 tequilas this evening, Simon. Have a...
Perfect. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for having us. Much appreciated.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.